Dawn, March 6th, 1836. The 13th day of the siege. It is still dark over San Antonio de Bexar when the bugles begin to sound. What they are playing has a name: the Degüello, the cutthroat, the no-quarter call, a centuries-old Spanish military signal that the men inside the walls do not have to understand to know what it means. There will be no surrender. There will be no prisoners. 1,800 Mexican soldiers begin to move through the cold pre-dawn darkness, scaling ladders in their hands. Inside the mission, fewer than 200 Texans, most of them still asleep. In 90 minutes, almost all of them will be dead. Almost everything you have been told about what happens next is wrong. What actually happened is, in many ways, more remarkable than the legend. Welcome back to the Western Ledger. I am Lamar. Last time we watched the Texas Revolution begin at Gonzales, settlers raising a flag that read, "Come and take it," over a small bronze cannon. Today we follow what happened 4 months later, when the war came to a crumbling Spanish mission outside San Antonio. The Alamo is the most famous battle in Texas history. It is also the most mythologized. John Wayne, school textbooks, Texas politicians, they have all rewritten what happened inside that compound. This is what actually happened, and why it mattered. Here is what the Alamo actually was: a former Spanish Catholic mission established in 1718, abandoned by the church in 1793. By 1836, it had been a fort, a hospital, a barracks. Whoever held San Antonio at any given moment held the Alamo. Its walls were 3 feet thick in some places and crumbling in others. The chapel had no roof. The compound was 3 acres across, far too large to be defended by the number of men available, and yet too cluttered with cannon and supplies for those men to maneuver inside it. Sam Houston, the newly named commander of the Texan Army, looked at the Alamo and saw a death trap. He sent orders to evacuate the compound, blow up the powder magazines, and pull back to consolidate forces further east. The Alamo, in Houston's calculation, was not worth a single Texan life. The men inside the Alamo ignored him. There were 3 of them who behaved as commanders, though only one of them officially was. They could not have been more different from one another. William Barrett Travis, the same young lawyer we met 4 years ago at Anahuac, getting himself arrested by Colonel Bradburn, was now 26 years old. A lieutenant colonel of regular cavalry. 6 feet tall, red-haired, devoutly Methodist when sober, a relentless self-promoter, and absolutely convinced he was on the verge of greatness. He had ridden into the Alamo with orders to relieve the garrison. He had no intention of giving the place back. James Bowie, frontier knife fighter, slave smuggler, land speculator, the most famous of the 3 men in his own time, was 40 years old and dying. Tuberculosis, typhoid, pneumonia, historians still argue. Whatever it was, his body was failing. He had come to Texas to escape his American debts and to start over. He had no intention of leaving. And David Crockett, former Tennessee congressman, recently defeated in re-election, a national celebrity who had famously told the people of his home district that they could go to hell and he would go to Texas, was 49 years old. an American legend in his own lifetime, looking for one more story to tell. 3 men, 3 reasons for being inside walls Sam Houston had ordered them to abandon. Ambition, debt, fame. None of them would survive what was coming.
It began on the afternoon of February 23, 1836. The Texans had been told the Mexican army was still hundreds of miles away, too far, too slowly moving to be a concern. Travis was so confident he had walked off to attend to personal business in town that morning. A militiaman climbing the bell tower of the San Fernando church for routine watch was the first to see them. A line of cavalry on the horizon. Then a second. Then a third. 1,800 men advancing in tight formation across the plain. Santa Anna had pushed his army through brutal winter weather and arrived a full month before anyone in Texas expected. The Texans pulled back inside the Alamo walls. Within hours, a blood-red banner was raised over the San Fernando bell tower. Every defender in the compound understood what it meant. No quarter. No surrender. No prisoners. Travis answered it the way he answered most things in his life. He fired the Alamo's largest cannon at the Mexican lines. That was day 1. What followed was 12 days of waiting. Mexican artillery, mostly inadequate at first, lobbed shells into the compound day and night. More harassment than serious damage. Texan defenders manned the walls in shifts. Bowie's illness worsened. By the 3rd day, he could no longer stand. He turned over command to Travis and was carried into a small room near the chapel, where he would spend the rest of the siege in his sickbed, a brace of pistols beside him. On February 24th, the 2nd full day of the siege, Travis sat down and wrote what would become the most famous letter in Texas history. He addressed it to the people of Texas and all Americans in the world. He wrote that he had been bombarded for 24 hours and had lost not a man, that the enemy had demanded surrender at discretion, and that he had answered with a cannon shot, that he would never surrender or retreat. And he signed it, Victory or Death. Couriers rode out under cover of darkness. The letter reached the Texas Convention at Washington on the Brazos. It reached newspapers across the United States. It made Travis, in death, exactly what he had spent his short life trying to become. Famous. But the help he asked for did not come. Sam Houston, still at the convention, could not raise an army fast enough. James Fannin, with 300 men at Goliad, started toward the Alamo on February 28th and turned back the same day. His wagons broke down. His oxen wandered off. His nerve failed. Only one group answered the call. On March 1st, 32 men from Gonzales, the same Gonzales whose cannon had started the war, slipped through the Mexican lines in the night and rode into the Alamo. Their arrival was almost certainly a death sentence. They knew it. They came anyway. By March 5th, the men inside the walls knew no other help was coming. Legend says that on that evening, Travis assembled his men in the courtyard, drew a line in the sand with his sword, and asked those willing to stay and die with him to cross it. The story comes from a single source decades after the fact and is almost certainly invention. But what is not in doubt is what happened next. The next morning was March 6th.
The Degüello played in the darkness, and the war that had begun at Gonzales over a small bronze cannon was about to give Texas its martyrs.
The assault began at 5:30 in the morning, in darkness. Santa Anna had divided his 1,800 men into 4 columns. Each column would attack a different wall. The idea was to overwhelm the defenders by hitting from every direction at once. The Texans, exhausted from 13 days of nearly continuous bombardment, had been ordered to rest in shifts. Many of them were asleep when the bugles began. The first warning was a Mexican soldier somewhere outside the walls shouting, "Viva Santa Anna!" a battle cry that was supposed to come after the assault began. It came too early. The shout drew Texan attention to the approaching columns. The first 2 waves of Mexican soldiers were broken at the walls. Texan cannon, packed with scrap iron and nails, swept the columns at point-blank range. The defenders on the parapets fired their long rifles down into the attackers. Mexican officers later wrote that the Alamo, in those first minutes, looked like a single sheet of flame. 2/3 of the Mexican attackers were killed or wounded in the opening assault. Santa Anna, watching from the rear, committed his reserve. The 3rd wave breached the north wall. Travis was there when it happened. He had run to the north battery when the assault began, calling to his men to fire. A musket ball struck him in the forehead. He was the first defender to die, less than 10 minutes into the battle. After the wall fell, what followed was not really a battle anymore. It was something happening inside a confined space. The defenders retreated into the long barracks and the chapel, fighting room by room. Mexican soldiers fired through doorways and then went in with bayonets. The Texan rifles, once empty, became clubs. James Bowie died in his sickbed. Accounts differ on the details. Some say he fired both pistols at the Mexican soldiers who broke down his door. Some say he was bayoneted where he lay, too weak to lift his weapons. David Crockett's death is the most disputed. The legend has him swinging his rifle Old Betsy in the chapel, surrounded by Mexican dead. Multiple Mexican eyewitness accounts, written down years before the legend formed, describe something different. They describe Crockett and a small group of men captured alive in the early morning, brought before Santa Anna, and executed on his order. Which version is true is still argued, nearly 200 years later. What is certain is that by 7 o'clock in the morning, every Texan defender was dead. The non-combatants survived. Susanna Dickinson, the widow of the cannon master killed in the chapel, was found with her infant daughter Angelina hiding in a room near the sacristy. Joe, a young enslaved man who had served Travis, was found nearby. Several Tejano women and children, mostly from Bowie's wife's family, were also spared. Santa Anna ordered the bodies of the defenders piled in 2 pyres outside the walls and burned. He kept the Mexican dead for proper burial. The defenders' ashes were left where they fell. In 90 minutes, closer to 80 by some accounts, the Alamo was over. What Santa Anna did not understand, as he stood in the smoking compound and counted his casualties, was what he had just created. Santa Anna believed the Alamo would terrify Texas into submission. He was wrong in the most consequential way it is possible for a victor to be wrong. 6 weeks later, on the afternoon of April 21st, 1836, at a place called San Jacinto, an army of Texan volunteers under Sam Houston charged a Mexican camp that was not expecting them. The fight lasted 18 minutes. 630 Mexican soldiers were killed. 9 Texans died. Santa Anna himself was captured the next day, hiding in a private's uniform in a marsh. What the Texans shouted as they ran into the Mexican lines that afternoon had not been planned. It came out of them. 3 words that would echo through Texas history and through American history for the next 200 years. Remember the Alamo. The same fortress Santa Anna had used to send a message had been turned into one. The dead defenders had become, in the moment of their deaths and forever after, what they had never quite been in life: heroes. The legend grew in the telling. Within a decade, popular accounts had Travis drawing his line in the sand. Within 20 years, Crockett's death had become a one-man stand against impossible odds. Within a century, John Wayne would direct and star in a 3-hour film that taught a generation of Americans the Alamo as a story of clean martyrdom. School textbooks across Texas would simplify. Politicians would invoke. The Alamo would become a kind of secular shrine, a place where America had been baptized in blood. But here is what the legend does not need to be true to be powerful. The men inside the Alamo were not saints. They were not selfless. Travis was a self-promoter chasing fame. Bowie was a violent man running from debts. Crockett was a defeated politician looking for a story. They held a position Sam Houston had ordered them to abandon for reasons that included pride and ambition and personal calculation. And they died anyway, together, when they could have walked out. That is the part the legend gets right. What Santa Anna created in the smoke of that 90-minute morning was not a story of heroism exactly. It was a story strong enough that 6 weeks later, it ran an army across a Texas prairie and into the rest of American history. 6 weeks, from the ashes of the Alamo to a captured Mexican general lying under a tree, dictating the surrender of his army to a man with a shattered ankle. That man, the commander who didn't march to relieve the Alamo, whose decision to retreat across half of Texas saved the revolution and almost cost him his reputation forever, was a former governor of Tennessee who had abandoned his own state, his own wife, and his own political career, and who almost no one in Texas in 1836 thought was the right man to lead an army. Next time, Sam Houston. Drunk, disgraced, and destined to lead a nation. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. I'll see you there.